grief is something that's going to be with you to various different levels throughout your life. And I think it's just about how you assimilate it and how you make it something that's useful.
I think we all have that, and I think it comes back at various times. It's not always in the full face of the storm, at the funeral, at the moment of death, or even the few days after that loss, that absence that's felt, and how that destroys any kind of semblance of normality in a life that's relied on that presence, that person that's now gone. And I think you're right, it's learning to live with the scar of it, the knot in the rope of your life.
Grief is at the central part and the kind of core nugget of this film. What was it like telling that story, and what was it like portraying that story?
It is a huge subject, and I think with Max's book, which this film is based on, there was an entry point to that was completely different to anything that I've ever seen. Because I think if you think a film about grief, your head goes a certain way, but this is a very kind of unconventional, very strange, very idiosyncratic story about it that somehow manages to still be emotional and still kind of tell some pretty, profound truths about the nature of loss and grief.
Yeah, being in the grief hole. I mean, it's it's pretty all-encompassing, and yet it's something you sort of had to carry very, very deep inside of you, especially because of the elements involved in this film, whether it's children, whether it's men dressed up in a crow uniform. It was sort of extraordinary and unique in that way, as is the book, as is the whole kind of ambition of the project. It's a challenge, but it also, as a producer of the film, it was something I very much wanted to have out there in the culture, because male grief and the way it's examined, I think especially in British culture, is quite limited. And as Dylan says, you imagine what that is in its usual format in an indie film, and this is a very, very unique and different take on all the colours of grief.
I also want to talk about kind of the specificity of this dad's grief, because you portrayed characters in the past that have lost, that have gone through something, but as you were kind of saying, this is different because it's a national piece. As you say, it might be a generational piece, but this is something that I kind of see you light up when you talk about it as a performer and as a producer. You're so happy to tell this story.
I mean, it still involves imagination, even though he's far closer to me than a lot of characters I've played. There are moments when it does look like someone, to begin with, who's just the fraying of the corner of his psyche. Things aren't quite as they appear, things out the corner of his eye aren't making sense. And then it becomes very prefrontal cortex as well. It's in the present tense, it's very much there. It's not him losing himself in fantasy. You think this guy is actually being harassed by some entity, some spiritual force. And then it becomes a relationship drama. I mean, it's kind of a weird buddy picture. This crow is a manifestation of an internal feeling, but it's become real. And he's everything from an amanuensis to Mary Poppins to a full horror trope to an annoying best friend to a therapist. So, then you just focus in on every one of those integral points. And there are moments where Crow's drawing it out of me as a character. And there are other moments where I'm sat on a sofa just imagining that moment for that character and just letting grief kind of wash through me in a way, because it's private, because it's his moment that we're prying in on, is allowed, not in front of his boys, not at the service. Hold the line, keep it going, get through the epitaph.
Some of those, the most heartbreaking moments
of holding emotion back.
Holding it back.
Yeah, for sure. But I think it was important to also show a man lost in the physical wrench of grief, as well as this sort of psychodrama that plays out in reality from his head.